Hello students, welcome to the 6th Writers Workshop, and in this workshop I decided that we are going to have a discussion about the P word, and the P word of course in academic writing is plagiarism. And so I'm just going to take you through a review of what plagiarism might look like and some tips for avoiding it. So we're going to go ahead and get started on that. So first of all, just a little bit of a review here. You know, we've been through several things in these writers' workshops, and these are intended just to be kind of reviews of the basics, certainly. But for many students watching these are probably good reminders about how to use sources, how to format, and just some basics about composition. And so now that you know what you know, this brings up this conversation about, well, how do I do all of that and avoid plagiarism? If you're unfamiliar with the term plagiarism, some people refer to it as cheating or copying or even stealing another person's writing or ideas. And that can really come in a lot of shapes and sizes when you're talking about academic writing. So one of the purposes of this workshop is just to have an honest, clear conversation about plagiarism. The second bullet point there is something that I've really learned, and I definitely believe in all of my years of teaching, which is that most plagiarism is not blatant cheating or stealing. Most of it is unintentional, just due to students not taking the time to do things thoroughly or well, or they just simply do not know. And so that has been one of my purposes in creating these writers' workshops, has been to refamiliarize all students with some of the basics of college writing to help you avoid those. The thing is, when you're in college, even if you didn't intend to commit plagiarism, plagiarism can still lead to serious consequences. Perhaps a professor will give you a lower grade, or it just really jeopardizes your success in a course. So you obviously want to do your best to avoid it, and it certainly can take different forms. So one way to avoid plagiarism is to be very careful about citing other people's words and ideas that came from your academic sources. I always tell students, when in doubt, cite it. Chances are you're not going to lose points for over-citing, but you definitely are going to lose points if you don't cite something that should have been. So hopefully in these workshops you've had a review of how to cite, what to cite, that type of thing, and you'll really start working hard at that. Another way that students sometimes get caught and accused of plagiarism is that they just don't cite correctly. There's a wrong way and a right way to cite according to APA. That's why in those workshops I really tried to show you examples of how to do it well. But remember, I've also guided you to the Purdue OWL. They have tons more examples there. This is not secret information that's not readily available to you. So there's really no excuse for, leaving out information like the year of publication or not using a page number for a quotation. You have lots of examples at your fingertips, and when you do it, when you cite incorrectly, that can be a form of plagiarism. So you want to be very careful there. And if you think about it, let's say, a few years down the road, you decide as a scholar, as a person who's an expert in your field, you decide to spend a year of your life doing research and writing an article, and you finally get that article published, and it appears in a journal, and it is widely available for other people to use in their own research. You spent a couple of years of your life going through that process. Well, to then not, give credit adequately or carefully to that person who put in all that work, That's why it's a serious issue, because you're not acknowledging the effort and the time that it took on someone else's behalf. So if you leave out his name, or you put the wrong page number, or you don't put the year of publication, it might sound like a small thing to you, but it's actually a pretty big thing when you put it into the larger context of why it's important to cite things correctly and well. All right, here's another tip. Whatever is in your paper, whatever sources appear in your paper, they must be on the references page. One thing that I always tell students to do, a couple of days before a paper is due, is print out your paper. Print out your references page. Go through your paper. Every time you come across a time you've used a source, check it, look at your references page, make sure it's on there, check it off. Because if you're not cross-checking those two, it's very easy to cite a source in your paper and forget to put it on your references page, or vice versa. You took something out of your paper, but you forgot to remove it from your references page. Both of those things are plagiarism. You cannot list a source on your references page that you never even cited in your paper, and you can't cite a source in your paper and not include the full reference on the references page. So the best way to do that is to kind of just go back to old school practices of printing out your paper and getting out a pen and cross-checking and looking for that carefully before you submit it. I will tell you, that is one of the first things I do when I grade a paper with sources, is I print out the student's references page and I do a quick scan of that paper, and I make sure that I see every one of those sources in the paper and on the references page. So I'm sure I'm not alone in checking those carefully. And if those two things are not aligned, that is a form of plagiarism. So you have to be very careful about that. Another tip is to make sure that you're using your sources accurately. If you put a direct quotation in your paper, your professor should be able to go back and find that article and see that exact quotation in that article. If you have misquoted, meaning you've changed up the words, maybe you left out a word, you changed a word, whatever, that is a form of plagiarism. You are citing someone who worked a long time on that article, and you are citing him and using his information poorly and in a sloppy way. You've got to make sure you have those things right. If you paraphrase something poorly, even if you've cited it, it's still plagiarism if you essentially have just changed a couple words and called it a paraphrase. Remember we talked about that? It has to be a complete reworking of the original. Those are both forms of plagiarism. And these things that I'm talking about, students typically commit these forms of plagiarism because they have not invested the amount of time necessary to do it well. They've rushed through the assignment, they've waited to the last minute. Most students who pace themselves and who put plenty of time into this type of academic work do not have a problem with these items. So really just using your time well and planning well in advance, that goes a long way to preventing these types of mistakes. Finally, this is something called self-plagiarism. Sometimes students will take a class and they don't do particularly well in it, or they fail it, and they will sign up for that class again, and they will recycle a paper from that class, or maybe there was a similar assignment in a previous course, and so they sign up for this other class and they think, oh, that sounds about the same, that assignment, and they'll try to recycle their own papers. Yes, there is something called self-plagiarism. Most professors expect that if you are enrolled in the class now, you are producing original material for that class. If you took the class before, and the assignment has not changed, you should write a fresh paper for this class. If you took a class that had a similar assignment, you should write a fresh paper for this class. That's called self-plagiarism. It is a form of plagiarism, and so you want to be very careful about that. Don't do that. Make sure you're always using your original work for every course. So I really felt like it was important to talk about plagiarism, talk through some of the ways that, that professors see plagiarism. Again, I don't think that most students are trying to cheat. Most forms of plagiarism occur because people run out of time, they don't plan well, they don't pay attention to specifics of APA and rules like that. So if you are being careful, giving yourself plenty of time, most of these things don't happen. But I did want to talk to you today about kind of just a general discussion about this, because unfortunately it does happen and I don't want it to happen to you. So thanks a lot for joining me in this writer's workshop. Good luck.